Hi, I'm Sam.
And I'm Felicia.
Welcome to the Bootleg Book Club.
Thank you for joining us today as we're reading and discussing 7 Days in June by Tia Williams.
Believe it or not, it's our 9th pick. So let's get started with about the author, Power of the Pen.
Okay. So Tia Williams, she's currently an executive copy director at Estee Lauder Companies. She graduated from the University of Virginia, and she has a deep history in the beauty industry. She worked as a beauty editor with Elle, Glamour, and many more companies after college. And then during the years, she became a beauty blogger pioneer. Her website was called Shake Your Beauty, and it's been raved about. And now she is writing. She's been writing. She has a couple books. Even one of her books, The Perfect Find, won the African American Literary Award for Best Fiction. And yeah.
Right. And actually, I wanted to mention something about her books.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to her interview with Therapy for Black Girls podcast, and she mentioned in there something I thought was interesting. Like, all of her books are like different stages of life, and like where she's been at in different stages of life, and like what she may have, like there's a touch of what she's gone through or may be going through, and it's like the ages in all the different books are different. So like I think her first book was like early 20s, and now this book is I want to say mid 30s, early 40s or something like that. So yeah, I thought that was cool that her books are kind of growing up with her.
Okay.
So for the book look, do you want to pull up the cover?
Yes, I have it right here.
I think it's a gorgeous cover. I think it's obvious that it's a romance story. The couple is in like a very intimate, deep embrace, I would say.
Yes.
I thought the colors that were used were interesting because like there seems to be a contrast between dark and light. And I think that's a little nugget from the book as well.
Yes.
And the fact that it seems to almost be like a collage of colors, I think is also a little nugget from the book as well, which I think we'll get into once we get into the deep dive.
Yes, I really liked where you're talking about it looks like a collage because art is talked about in this book, you know. That is very nice, like foreshadowing. I really like how it's this time actual people who are embraced on the front of this page versus it's been really nice. Of course, you see cartoons, right? But I think it's a difference when you see like these are actually portrayals of human people, you know,
I think
that you get to see. This
is our most grown up cover.
Yes, exactly.
Which makes sense because it's our most grown up book.
Well, no. I think Yinko was a grown-up book. It was just a different tone, almost.
Definitely.
Yes.
Definitely.
This has a different tone, which kind of goes into, like, what you're saying, the darkness part. I think this has a level of darkness that we'll, of course, go into.
Do you want to go into how many pages and all that good stuff?
You could do that, because mine usually is a bit off.
It is a total of 328 pages. Really, 326. The last couple of pages are acknowledgments, which I'm sure you've probably read, and just reading group guides and that sort of stuff, like discussion questions and that sort of thing, which I thought is interesting. I actually like when books have that. I think it's cool, especially if like you're in a book club. I've done book clubs before, like in-person ones with other people. And the discussion questions, I think, have always been helpful and interesting for, like, to guide us and that sort of thing. So that was cool. Overall, I would like to say this is a story of a second chance at love. I think we know the main character is Eve, but I think we get a glimpse of everybody's, like, point of view at one point. And then also, I think Shane, who is the love interest, I think he is very prominent in this book as well. Like, his point of view is very prominent as well. But it does touch on almost everyone's, I would say.
Yes.
So like I was saying, it's a second chance at love type of story, but I also feel like it's about motherhood and ancestry, and it just goes into all of these different themes. And the main character, Eve, she's a writer, but she's also a single mom who like fell in love at a young age unexpectedly, considering her less than ideal upbringing, and she falls in love with basically a juvenile delinquent. And it's like this very deep love at a very young age, but you can tell that in a way they almost need each other. That's how it's kind of set up.
Yes.
And they end in a rather sad way as teenagers, but they kind of find their way back to each other as adults. And we learn about their past through flashbacks. And then we're going to be, as the story goes on, you navigate through their current lives as successful authors and who they're trying to be and how they're trying to be true to themselves. And in the end, you're waiting to see how far will this reconnection go, basically. So do you want to start with the bookmark? I'm always happy to start because I know I have the most quotes, but you can go ahead.
So, yes, I actually had a lot of quotes this time too, but I'm going to keep it down to 2. I will say, though, I think we had one that was the same.
Okay.
So, starting off there. Listen, caring about things don't make you soft. It makes you alive.
Right.
This was really powerful. Shane, as you mentioned, is another kind of main character, and he is pretty much trying to mentor someone at this point, and that's kind of his advice to this person who's very much had a hard life. And is kind of like joking on him, like, I don't want to share my feelings at times, like different things like that. And he's just being realistic of the power of caring and being an emotional person, I think, which is something very different, because there's other times it seems like Shane himself is still struggling to feel.
I completely agree. As far as that quote, yes, that is one we had that was similar. I also thought it was a profound moment because it's a moment where Shane is speaking to another male character.
Yes.
And I thought that was very profound and powerful because we can talk about toxic masculinity, we can talk about patriarchy, we can talk about how men are raised not to feel, but here we have a man telling another, I'm gonna say he's a boy. We're gonna have a man telling a boy that it's okay to care, it's okay to feel. You're not gonna be soft or less than because of that. Like, it makes you who you are. You're alive. Like, you have breath in you, and I found that part of it to be profound too, as far as who it was, like who this quote was between.
Yeah. And next I have something that kind of comes a bit later in the book, where it's Audrey, who is the daughter, talking. Just be an active listener. If you listen hard enough, you could tell what a person needs from you. And if you give them what they need, you've got a friend for life. Audrey, she's young. She's 12 years old. And the thing here, though, is she's kind of really wise for her age. She has
incredibly, I would say even more wise than some of these other teenagers we've been reading about in other books. And I was like, the stuff she says, the way she thinks is very profound. Mm-hmm. Is that because of private school? I don't know, but I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, girl.
Yes. So, I was really impressed by this idea that it came from her, 1, and then 2, that there's this time where you could really learn what it takes, like what's kind of at this point you're going through life, and life is so difficult, and adults can be messy, is like the conversation, where she's like, at times it could be really simple though, and the simple part about it is just being decent enough to listen to people. And that, I think, kind of opens the door to a lot of issues here, where if people were listening and willing to be truthful about that, we could have made friends here.
Right. The last one I'll share for now, and I'll save the others for deep dive, is, like I mentioned, Eve is a single mother, and she hasn't, at the beginning of the book, you learn she hasn't really dated in a long time. She hasn't really been with anyone in a long time, which is kind of ironic because she's an erotic romance author. But she says, "Alone doesn't care that I don't shave my legs in the winter. Alone never gets disappointed by me." And I could really, like, I know, like, for some people that might be a sad quote, but for me, like, I was just like, yeah, girl, I get that. I think sometimes it's hard to enter the dating world, or hard to enter new relationships or even friendships, because it's like, I don't want to let down another person, especially when you are dealing with a disability. So, in which Eve is dealing with a disability, and she's had negative reactions to that disability in the past. And I think for me, someone who deals with, like, anxiety and that sort of thing, I can understand, not Eve's disability as far as migraines, but I can understand not wanting to really engage in a new relationship and having to explain this part of your life, and having to potentially deal with the ramifications of someone not understanding and just getting tired of it. And it's just like, I don't want someone else to be disappointed by me. I don't want to get disappointed by being excited at the thought of being with someone. Like, and so, like, alone a lot of times can just feel easier. So I kind of understood that point that she was making.
Okay. So, POV then.
Okay, yes. Favorite and least favorite characters in this section. Let's go.
So for me, it is the daughter, Audrey. And I want to share her full name, actually, which is Audrey Zora Tony Mercy Moore.
I wrote a note when I was reading, I think something along, I would have to go and find the specific, but I remember, like, the first time, like, she called her daughter's name, and I was like, so you just put all the Black authors up in there.
Everybody up in there. And I love that. I love that little shout out and honor to Black women writers. And that is very important here when Eva is a writer herself, right. You know? So
you can tell she's honoring them in a way.
Yeah, so I really loved that. And kind of like we were saying earlier, she is just a phenomenal young girl. And I'm just really drawn to that. And I just appreciate that.
I appreciate the role she played in this book, for sure, especially between her mother and Shane. Like, I really appreciate that part.
Yes.
But sometimes she read as a little unrealistic to me, but then maybe that's because I'm like, I don't remember being that way at 12. Nope. And, yeah, I don't know.
And I think that's the thing. I remember being a little bit like that, you know, this sense of, because there's this part where she wants to be a therapist, like a celebrity therapist. And so she kind of hustles her classmates into, like, giving them advice and everything. And not saying I did all of that, but I feel like there was times, like, I was hustling my classmates. Like, I'm about to make this spinner and sell it, different things like that. And just being this type of innovative person.
Okay, I can see that. My favorite character, I think in a way I kind of fell in love with Eve and Shane, like, even with their dark sides, like, I still, like, I felt for them, like, I really, like, fell for them, you know?
Yes.
But outside of the main characters, I would say Cece, the editor, was one of my favorite characters. She was just funny.
She was cool.
And she was, like, in everybody's business, and she was doing things just to get the tea, and she, I just liked her as a character and as a person, and I honestly was reading and I was like, you know, I would want to be friends with Cece, because she would always know what's going on without being, like, too drama filled, if that makes sense. And also I found her view on life and love to be a little bit more realistic and a little bit more aligned with how I view that stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I think she was a great character too. But I think at times she was the drama, but in a good way where she, she really supported the main characters.
Right.
So that's something I did appreciate. And I agree, there's a sense for the two main characters that you just really connect with them at certain points where it's just like, it's really hard not to like them. So it's just like, of course.
And even though they had these dark pasts,
yes.
I found that maybe I didn't necessarily identify with everything in their dark past, but some of the like emotions or feelings that like were written about them, like I was like, yes, I get that. Yes. But yeah. And then for my least favorite character, I would say it was Eve's mom, Lizette. I just felt like she was totally checked out. I feel like she never really stepped up as an adult, and I could see why Eve and her have a strained relationship. And it's like, what really upsets me, I felt like, was like Lizette as the mother not understanding why that relationship was strained and feeling like, oh, just because she's Eve's mother, like they should be close and that she should have access to her. But it's like, when you have contributed to my trauma so much, when you have not been able to recognize your mistakes and apologize, it's like, I don't want to have to engage with this type of person. It doesn't mean like I don't care. It's just like I can understand not wanting to engage with that type of person.
Yes, I agree. Lizette's mother is a person that I did not like. I think the other person I did not like would be Khalil.
I wrote Khalil equal Hotep.
Exactly. And I think because I connected to that idea of like, I think there's a part in the book, there's a panel and he just, he's mansplaining, he's interrupting people, he's catering to himself, and all the Hotep things he does.
The duality of the simultaneous consumption and destruction of black men. I was like,
why? Yes. So I think just reading that, and just knowing that energy just never works out for me. I just feel like I just didn't really like that.
Just go away.
Yeah.
So into our deep dive, I'm going to kind of do this out of order. So one of the topics that we talk about in our deep dive is usually a writing wish, and I feel like it should go here right before we actually do the actual deep dive. Because I think it's important. And basically, both of us had the same writing wish, which was we think this book should have come with a trigger warning because there are very dark themes in it. And so we're going to say right here, not only are we about to do a spoiler, and like alert for that, but we also want to alert you to trigger warnings. Like there is going to be discussion of self-harm, substance abuse, suicide ideation, sexual assault.
Yes.
I truly think there should have been a trigger warning, and here's the trigger warning for anyone watching or listening. And but with that would have been my writing wish for the book. I think it should have come with its own trigger warning. But with that, let's get into the spoilers and the deep dive.
Yes. So from the beginning, I think the very beginning of how the book started, it just started very spicy, very explicit, and I didn't expect it, right? So
it wasn't bad by any means, but it just was unexpected.
Exactly. So
I think we kind of saw the cover and had heard about the book and thought, oh, this is gonna be like a cute little romance love story.
Like 7 days. This is gonna be quick. This
like
is gonna be nice,
like a whirlwind, passionate romance.
And it just wasn't, even from the very beginning. And it was where, like, I kind of read that first chapter and I took a break, right? Not saying I don't, like, read things or know about, like, things that could be intense like that. It was just unexpected.
Right, I agree.
So I had to come back to it. But then once I came back to it, I couldn't stop reading. This, like you said, this is a love about two people who are rekindling. And you find Eva at the very beginning of the novel in the midst of her career, right? Which is kind of wanting to start talking about. She is an author and she writes a black fantasy novel about...
Erotica novel.
Erotica
which I think
novels.
is very important to
Yes.
because I think it is what leads her to kind of start feeling like she's not a serious author.
Yes.
She's feeling like, there's more that she wants to write about, but she also feels like these books have become so popular. Like she's, like they tell you in the book that she's supposed to be writing her 15th in the series of this black fantasy erotica novels. And, she's like, this is my bread and butter, and she doesn't necessarily want to leave it. But, she's ready to kind of move on from that.
Yes. And one thing that she talks about eventually is, I write for money, right? Mm-hmm. And someone tries to tell her, you should write for the truth. And she was like, I can't afford to write the truth. I already know the truth. I'm writing basically for survival, right? She has a young daughter that she's taking care of. And I think that was something I connected with in this sense of the things, and it has been a theme throughout the books we read, you can't always do your passion when you have the realities of life that you're facing. Sometimes you just have to do things, especially career-wise, to get it done, right? And to see the next day. And I also like with her career, though, even though she's in this position where she's feeling that she can't get away from these characters, she acknowledges what they did for her during that time. She talks about how writing these characters, she wrote them when she was young. She wrote them when she was like a teenager, right? After she has this experience. And they don't grow, right? They're vampires in this fantasy world, she says, but I grew up, right? Yeah. So now that I'm in a different stage in my life, and this is where I kind of need to find a way to end this, because she has another story in her, right? And I think that's where you lead to this idea of womanhood, motherhood, and family for her, right? Where she's led to tell this story because she experiences this disability, this invisible disability, she says, where she it's not a migraine, it's more than that, right? Yeah. Like she can't,
it's excruciating. She can be put to the point of vomiting, intense pain. And speaking of motherhood and ancestry and womanhood and all that stuff, she realizes that other women in her family have actually experienced this, but because they had no medical knowledge, no history to draw on from it, you learn that they were kind of cast out of society because of it. You learn that they were really admonished because of it, and they went through their own turmoil because of it, and really become outcasts.
Yes. And you realize becoming outcast and all these things, her mom Lizette, the way she explains it, it's like we're cursed, right? And it leads to being cursed even in romance, right? And then you get to this romance where you see that she had a chance with Shane and it didn't work out. Right. And now it's years later, they're coming back together, and I think the rest of the book is them knowing and seeing these feelings of we are good together, but what happened in that past, those 7 days back in the past.
Right. I thought it was really important that we had those flashbacks, but I didn't realize how dark they would be. I think it was important because you learn how it informed both of their writing careers, which I felt was really interesting. And I also felt like it was important because it was like for them to move on and for them to really get that second chance at love, like they had to be honest with each other about what happened back then. And basically what happened, was they met in high school, but the way they met was basically Eva wanted a new friend. She had been moving around very often, very frequently. She made a new friend in Shane because she could see that he kind of was on the fringes of high school society, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
They get into a very bad fight, not with each other, but with other people. And then they end up going on basically like a 7-day binger at like in someone's house that Shane happens to know because he deals drugs and quite frankly also like solicits himself too, basically. Yes. And that's how he's able to stay in the house or whatever. But like they go on a 7-day binger, like all types of drugs. You learn that Eva self-harms. You learn that Shane is an alcoholic. You learn that even though throughout all of that, they were able to really connect with each other. Like they slept very, like that, like when they slept together, that was like the deepest sleep that they had. And I don't mean slept together as in like sex. I mean slept together as in just like laying in the bed together. Like that's like when they felt most comfortable and vulnerable with each other and hadn't felt that way with other people. And you learn that they make these promises to each other to like really be there for each other and not allow the other person to go through hurt. Unfortunately, they can't keep those promises. And in the beginning of the book, you think Shane just left her, but really and truly what happened was that Eva overdosed. And more than that, when her mother finds this out, her mother sends Shane to prison, basically. And that's why he stayed away for so long. But also he wasn't ready to be with her because he was an alcoholic and he had to overcome that before he could really reintroduce himself into her life. But you learn how he overcame that struggle. You learn what he's doing in his life, like as far as he's an English teacher now after writing he wrote 4 books drunk, but doesn't want to, he's sober now, doesn't see himself as a writer anymore, but now more so as a teacher and a mentor, which I think is a beautiful thing. Yes. When you realize, when you come out of one struggle and realize, okay, what am I going to do now? And I thought it was beautiful that he found his thing that he can do now. Yes. And it wasn't like he was just desperate to go back to writing and desperate to like be back in that space. Like I think he was very open to acknowledging he's in a new space and this is like this new thing that he can engage in.
Yes. Well said there. That was just so good. So many thoughts where one, it was really hard. I think again, yes, the back story was necessary, but throughout the book, it's like you don't know. So you're getting these pieces, right? Mm-hmm. You're getting this piece. She's fighting so she doesn't get sexually assaulted. She feels this pain, so she's gonna self-harm. He had this accident when he was young, like he was an orphan, didn't get to be with the foster family, so Shane feels like he deserves pain in his life. Mm-hmm. So these things, it does inform the future, but like the way it comes out in little pieces, it's like tiny pieces of your heart is being cut of this, like what is going on here. And I think one thing that was happening, like you said, he went through this trauma, he had this kind of toxic life, and he found something else to put his energy in, which is teaching and which is mentoring. And I think part of that came from, he talks about having a mantra, right? Mm-hmm. And he's mentoring a student in the beginning, and he realized the student really likes planets. So he's like, name the planets as your mantra. And you don't really know where he gets this, but the student asks him, what's your mantra? And you don't find out until later. Mm-hmm. But he got his mantra from Eva, right? Which is like, don't fight, right? Where she's like, like you said, they had an incident where they're fighting people, and she's just like, don't fight, right? So they're in this commitment to save each other. Right. And this mantra is what kind of saves him. And then you realize Audrey, Eva's like, Audrey is kind of getting in trouble in school and different things like that. And with like the whole celebrity therapy kind of thing, when she's trying to kind kind of do therapy sessions and post it online on Snapchat with other students. And her mom's like, what do I always say? And Audrey says, resist, persist, insist. And it's like a little nugget of, oh, that's Eva's mantra, right? But and it ended up, like, you know, they end up talking about other things, but I think that was really cool too, where you have this tool now of you've gone through certain things and you're trying to heal from it. So yes.
I think it also centers you, right?
Yes.
And helps you get back on whatever path you're supposed to be on. So I think that's helpful as well.
Yes. I also like how you were introducing and saying for Shane about writing, of how the way he writes, I think, and you discover throughout the book, he's written 4 books, but he's also seen as a very highbrow type of author, right? He's gotten awards, he's very highly esteemed, but Eva isn't, right? So yes, you have this moment where they're on this panel, and the panel is about, you know, the Black literary community and authors talking to each other on this panel and answering questions. And there's this part where they have this conversation in front of the crowd to answer a question, but it's also a conversation in between themselves where they realize, and they're kind of talking about how Shane reads Eva's books. So Eva, in her career, she thinks, you know, my books, they have somewhat meaning. I have a following, but it's superficial.
Right.
But Shane sees a lot more. He sees something deeper in it, and he goes super into it. And you realize eventually that their books are talking to each other.
Yes. And I was reading, and I was like, they were at the panel, and I was reading, and I actually noted, I said, on like, are they writing about each other? Like, so after I read the quote where it was like, girls are given the weight of the world, but nowhere to put it down, the power and magic born in that struggle, it's so terrifying to men that we invented reasons to burn y'all at the stake. You made, and then goes further a little bit, and then you made Gia's magic broom 10 times stronger than Sebastian's fangs. Witch trumps monster. Tells me everything I need to know about why men are scared of women. And in that moment, I realized, like, are they writing about each other? Are they going back and forth about each other? And I kid you not, a couple pages after that, she, like, it's the panel has ended, and they're next to each other, and she's like, stop writing about me. And he's like, you first, or something like that. And I was like, of course they are writing about each other. But yeah, I picked up on that as well.
And he even says, I'm not just writing about you, I'm writing to you.
So, yeah, no, I thought that was very powerful as well. And just like a nice, I don't know, I feel like there's so many connections and like moments within this book that I really appreciated. To dive a little bit deeper on the like idea of second chance romance, there were so many moments where I was like, I know how that feels. Mm-hmm. Like, because I've been in a situation where I thought like getting back together with someone would mean like, you know, this is it for us. Like, we must like be meant to be in each other's lives.
This is endgame.
And I remember reading like some of these moments, and I just was like, oh, I get that. And for example, Eva would giggle into her palm despite herself. Why is it still so easy to talk to you? Always was. It's just who we are. Like, there's these moments of like, yeah, there are just some people in our lives. Sometimes it feels like we are meant to be in each other's lives because we're so comfortable with each other. Like, maybe from day one, maybe like, you know, you finish each other's sentences. Maybe you just find that you're always like laughing in their presence, or just like can feel vulnerable in their presence. So I could really like identify with that. And she says about their past. So like they're you know, they're presently together. And she says about their past, I was hoping I'd romanticized it over the years, that we weren't real. Her words sounded delicate, breakable. I think sometimes it's like, because a person hurt you in such a way, you want to believe that, like, not you want to believe, but you start to believe that, did I make up what we experienced? Did I like idealize what we experienced? And it's like, because they hurt you, or because it didn't necessarily turn out the way that you expected or wanted it to turn out, you start to think, maybe I idealized the situation, romanticized the situation. But one thing this book reminded me of, and one thing someone has said to me, was that you can't take away that you loved someone in the past, right? Like, it's already happened. Like, you already had those feelings. And it just was like a reminder that, you know, love is real, and like, love happens. And it's not that you're necessarily romanticizing. It just happens to be the past. And it really was that good. It just was the past, you know?
I definitely hear that. And then for me, I think the last thing I want to say, I don't know if you want to say anything else. Another big part, along with the actual romance, I think, was, this is Black romance, of course. Again, emphasizing that, where she's a writer, Eva's a writer, and her book has a fandom, and eventually it has a chance to become a movie. And the director that they could currently get is a director who wants to cast white actors, right?
Just completely whitewash every part of her book.
Exactly. And there's a part where eventually towards the end, she kind of recognized and realized that, no, they need to be Black. This is important. And Shane helps her with that realization, with that kind of coming there. Just her relationship with Shane, and the way that within the memories and the flashbacks, it's like you see Shane, or just their lives going in and out. And it was the same thing towards the end, almost, before they could actually be together. It was kind of an in and out type of situation. Until they get to a party of Cece's, and then again when Cece organizes them for them to be together, where
that's another reason to love Cece. She's the reason why. I mean, we're already in the spoiler part, but I would say she's the reason why they get their happily ever after.
Yes, but I just feel like in that between of, she's figuring out things for her life and career, Shane is not there blocking her. Shane is there making her realize and come up with these realizations of who she is. And I really appreciate that part of their romance that leads them to being able to be together in the end.
Right. And this will be the last quote I read, even though there was other ones I wanted to read. So when they finally do come together in the, like, literally very end of the book, child, yes. I was like, what is going on?
Yes.
What is going on? But when they finally come together, Eva says, this wasn't healthy. No, they weren't supposed to see each other. It wasn't the whole point of breaking up to focus on themselves, work through past trauma separately. But Eva couldn't ignore the dissenting voice in her head, wondering if maybe there was a chance they'd be stronger together. And I just love that. I was like, yes, finally. I was like, is this going to be a romance or not? But finally, in the end, it worked out.
Yes.
And maybe that's what was real adult love was, being fearless enough to hold each other close, no matter how catastrophic the world became. Loving each other with enough ferocity to quell the fears of the past. Just effing be there.
Yes.
And hopefully one day we can find someone who will just effing be there.
Period. Yes.
But I honestly can say, I don't know if there was anything else you want to say.
No, that was
I'm
great.
ready to kind of wrap up. So I would just say, honestly, I loved this book. I do think it needed a trigger warning. There is definitely some deep shit in here.
And there's even more. Honestly, there are things we didn't even get to touch on.
Right. Yeah. But I genuinely loved this book. I genuinely am so happy that they ended up together. It just reinvigorated my beliefs on love.
Okay.
But also
I love that.
But beyond that, just also being true to yourself.
Yes.
And finding the truth in you, and also inspired me, I think, to find a mantra that will help me get to writing. I noticed that you put down here, read, believe, love, our mantra. I noticed you put that in our notes. And I was like, yeah, that has been a good mantra for us, like for our podcast and like, you know, getting back into loving reading and into loving talking about books and stuff like that. But I also am like now inspired to find, okay, what will be the mantra for me to get into writing and like maybe pursue these like other dreams and things that I have.
Like what will keep us going, you
Right.
know, when we are down there in the trenches.
Right. Well, that's it for me on this book. I loved it.
Yes.
To find the star rating and the full review, you'll have to check out our Instagram and our blog. And I just want to go ahead and say our giveaway is still going on. There's still some time to enter. It ends on June 24th, I believe.
Yes.
So there's still some time to enter. Remember, we're giving away 7 items for making it to our 7th podcast, and it's over 70 followers. Anything else from you?
No, that's pretty much it. Loved the book. Definitely suggest everybody to read. Thank you for joining us, you guys, on this 9th podcast of ours.
Yes, thanks for joining in on our journey, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.